What if I told you that a single secret, buried centuries ago by a king, shaped not only his kingdom but the very psychology of human societies for generations to come? Imagine a secret so profound that it survived revolutions, wars, and the relentless erosion of time, hidden within the folds of human perception itself. This is not a story of treasure or conquest, but of cognition, adaptation, and the fragile balance between knowledge and survival. It is a story that challenges our understanding of power, secrecy, and the very mechanisms by which societies evolve. In the early 16th century, in a kingdom perched on the edge of Europe and the unknown expanses of the East, a monarch faced a dilemma that transcended ordinary political strategy. He was King Vladislav of a realm under constant threat, a kingdom whose borders were a shifting kaleidoscope of alliances and invasions. His advisors urged him to amass armies, to fortify cities, to impose draconian laws, but the king understood that brute force alone would not secure the future of his people. He recognized a fundamental truth about human societies. Survival often depends not on what is visible, but on what is concealed. He conceived a secret strategy, an idea that would outlast him, and survive centuries, yet it was never inscribed in stone or parchment, never documented in the annals of official history. Instead, it was encoded in rituals, in subtle societal structures, in the way knowledge itself flowed through his kingdom. At first glance, it seemed almost trivial, a set of cryptic codes, ceremonial gestures, and enigmatic instructions to his closest confidants. But beneath these symbols lay a profound understanding of collective human behavior. The king had intuited something that modern neuroscience confirms. Human cognition is not linear, and collective perception can be influenced by carefully structured ambiguity. By controlling the narrative without dictating it, by providing cues without revealing the full map, Vladislav created a system that allowed his kingdom to adapt fluidly to external pressures. This was not manipulation in the crude sense. It was an early recognition of what psychologists today describe as cognitive scaffolding. By shaping the environment in which decisions were made, he indirectly guided outcomes, enhancing resilience without forcing compliance. Neuroscience tells us that our brains are constantly predicting, constructing models of the world from incomplete information. We are wired to fill gaps, to anticipate threats, to simulate scenarios that have never occurred. The king leveraged this principle intuitively. He knew that by embedding a secret in plain sight but shrouded in layers of ritual and social custom, he could steer the collective behavior of his society even after he was gone. This was a profound exercise in what modern theorists might call distributed cognition, the idea that knowledge and problem-solving do not reside solely within individuals but are shared across networks, be they social, cultural, or informational. In essence, Vladislav designed his kingdom as a living system, a network of human brains and behaviors that could self-regulate, adapt, and propagate wisdom long after his reign. The secret involves seemingly mundane practices: the timing of market days, the allocation of resources in local guilds, the ritualized transmission of certain stories and myths. Yet, each component was meticulously chosen to reinforce the resilience of the community. For example, he instructed local leaders to observe specific behavioral patterns in public gatherings, subtly rewarding cooperation and punishing ostracism, not through law, but through reputation and recognition. In modern terms, he was orchestrating social heuristics, nudging behavior without coercion, guiding the emergent properties of collective intelligence. Over decades, these rituals became embedded, internalized by the population as cultural norms. Generations passed, yet the underlying principle, the hidden architecture of adaptation, remained intact. Even when the kingdom faced famine, invasion, or plague, the social networks Vladislav designed allowed for rapid reconfiguration, redistribution of resources, and preservation of knowledge. His secret had become a self-sustaining system, operating beneath the conscious awareness of those it governed. Consider this from a psychological perspective. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We interpret the world through narratives, stories, and symbols. The king's interventions exploited this cognitive tendency, embedding critical adaptive knowledge in forms that were both memorable and interpretable, yet cryptic enough to evade the destructive impulses of power-hungry successors. It was a kind of evolutionary thinking applied to culture. Encode the necessary information in forms that will survive the noise of human ambition and error. Historians often note the absence of direct documentation for this secret. In conventional archives, there is no letter, no scroll, no proclamation describing it explicitly. Yet the effects are observable. Historians and anthropologists studying the region centuries later noticed patterns in social cohesion, dispute resolution, and crisis response that were inexplicable by conventional political theory. They were observing the long-term echoes of Vladislav's invisible hand. This leads to a deeper philosophical question. Can knowledge exist independently of conscious awareness? Can a secret be truly powerful if it operates not through coercion or proclamation, but by shaping the adaptive structures of society itself? Cognitive science suggests that it can. Just as neural circuits encode information that governs behavior without conscious deliberation, cultural systems can encode adaptive strategies that persist beyond the lifespans of their creators. Imagine society as a complex network, akin to a neural network in the human brain. Each node, each individual is influenced by local inputs, yet the global behavior emerges from the interactions of countless such nodes. Vladislav's secret was designed not to control the network directly, but to adjust the parameters so that the emergent behavior would favor resilience and continuity. In this sense, he was a pioneer of what modern systems theorists call indirect governance, the art of shaping outcomes by configuring the environment rather than issuing commands. It is an approach that anticipates contemporary insights into social dynamics, collective intelligence, and resilience engineering. The paradox of the king's secret is particularly striking. By deliberately keeping it hidden, by refraining from centralizing knowledge in a written codex or decree, he ensured its survival. Written records are fragile. They can be destroyed, lost, misinterpreted. But knowledge embedded in social rituals, in patterns of interaction, in the very architecture of cognition, is remarkably robust. It adapts, reproduces, and persists, much like an organism evolving under selective pressures. In modern psychological terms, Vladislav understood the interplay between working memory, long-term memory, and cultural transmission. He recognized that humans are more likely to internalize knowledge that is contextually relevant, repeated in meaningful patterns, and socially reinforced. By designing his secret to operate through these channels, he created a form of cultural memory that could outlast individual lifespans, political upheavals, and even linguistic change. One might ask, what exactly was the content of the secret? And here we encounter the most intriguing dimension of all. The secret was not a formula for wealth, nor a military tactic, nor a prophecy of succession. It was a meta-strategy, a principle for navigating uncertainty and complexity. It encoded adaptive decision-making itself, resilience under pressure, and the preservation of collective coherence in the face of disruption. In other words, it was less about what to do and more about how to think, collectively, as a society. This aligns closely with contemporary insights from behavioral economics and neuropsychology. Human groups face cognitive bottlenecks. Individual biases, heuristics, and emotional responses can derail collective action. By structuring society in a way that mitigated these bottlenecks by guiding attention, shaping incentives, and embedding feedback loops, Vladislav's secret reduced the risk of catastrophic failures while promoting adaptability. There's a poetic irony here. The king's greatest insight was that human weakness, our susceptibility to fear, rumor, and short-term thinking could be transformed into a stabilizing force if properly channeled. Moments that seemed chaotic, irrational, or dangerous were in fact the very signals that allowed the system to self-correct. Neuroscience refers to similar phenomena in the brain, where apparent noise is essential for learning and adaptation. Without variability, without uncertainty, neural networks cannot adjust to new information. The same principle applies to societies. Controlled exposure to challenge strengthens collective cognition. Centuries later, scholars examining the remnants of Vladislav's kingdom observed a striking continuity of governance and social resilience, even through invasions that toppled neighboring states. Anthropologists noted festivals, rituals, and communal practices whose origins had been long forgotten, yet whose function continued to reinforce cooperation, problem-solving, and resource allocation. The king's secret had survived not as a document, not as a legend, but as a living, adaptive system encoded in human behavior. This offers a profound lesson for contemporary societies. We often assume that knowledge must be explicit, centralized, and documented to endure. Yet Vladislav's example illustrates the power of implicit knowledge, embedded in networks, rituals, and patterns of interaction. True resilience, whether in societies or neural circuits, emerges not from rigid control but from flexible, distributed intelligence. The philosophical implications are equally compelling. Knowledge, secrecy, and power are deeply intertwined, but not in the obvious ways. Sometimes withholding information, or rather structuring it so that it is internally discovered rather than externally dictated, creates more enduring influence than any decree or edict. The king's secret was not about domination, but about survival, adaptation, and the emergent intelligence of human networks. In reflecting on this story, one begins to see history itself as a vast cognitive experiment. Kings, generals, and philosophers may have believed they were shaping events through linear action, but often the outcomes that persist are those shaped by subtle, distributed forces, rituals, culture, collective memory, and adaptive heuristics. Vladislav's hidden strategy exemplifies this truth. It is a reminder that much of what shapes human societies is invisible, operating beneath the level of conscious awareness, encoded in the patterns of interaction between people and manifesting over centuries. For modern observers, this challenges our assumptions about leadership, knowledge, and influence. It suggests that true insight often lies in understanding systems, networks, and emergent behaviors rather than chasing immediate, tangible results. It calls us to appreciate subtlety, to study the quiet forces that guide adaptation, and to recognize that sometimes doing less, revealing less, can achieve more. In closing, consider the metaphor of the brain as a system and society as an energy network, with historical events acting as signals transmitted across nodes. The king's secret was a modulation of the network's parameters, ensuring that the signal propagated in a way that reinforced stability and adaptability. Every ritual, every coded gesture, every social heuristic was a node in this vast, invisible web, interacting to produce resilience over generations. And perhaps most strikingly, the moments of apparent weakness, uncertainty, or ambiguity, the things that might seem like flaws, were in fact essential. They allowed the system to self-correct, to learn, and to adapt to pressures no single individual could foresee. History, as it turns out, is less about the visible victories or written decrees and more about the invisible, persistent structures that guide human behavior across centuries. Vladislav's secret endures because it understood this principle intuitively, long before neuroscience and systems theory formalized it. As we reflect on this, we are invited to ask ourselves, what secrets do our own societies encode, often unconsciously, in the patterns of interaction, ritual, and culture? How does knowledge propagate, adapt, and persist beyond the lifespans of its creators? And perhaps most provocatively, how might we, as individuals and collectives, design our networks of influence in ways that enhance resilience, creativity, and collective intelligence? History is not only a record of what happened, but a laboratory for understanding how knowledge, secrecy, and adaptation coalesce to shape human destiny. The story of the king who hid a secret so profound that it survived centuries is a testament to the subtle power of distributed cognition, the resilience of culture, and the enduring intelligence embedded in human networks. It challenges us to look beyond what is written, beyond what is visible, and to consider the invisible architectures that guide societies through uncertainty and change. If this story has sparked your curiosity, if it has made you reconsider the hidden forces that shape human history, take a moment to reflect, comment, and share your insights. History is a conversation across time, and every insight, every question, adds a node to the network of understanding. If you enjoyed this journey into the mind of a king and the invisible architectures of society, make sure to like this video. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to Past Lens for more explorations into the hidden patterns of human history, society, and cognition. Every subscription, every discussion, keeps the signal of knowledge alive, transmitting it across our own networks, and continuing the conversation that began centuries ago with a secret, a king, and a society learning to survive through the wisdom of subtlety, adaptation, and collective intelligence.